Where are you watching from? I'll ask at the top because this is a story that belongs to everyone who's ever been dismissed, underestimated, or discarded by the people they loved. If you've ever been told, softly, cruelly, or in a crowded room, that you've outlived your usefulness, this is for you. The reception lights cut the rooftop ballroom into glittering islands. Laughter bubbled like champagne. Glasses chimed, a string quartet played the same jaunty tune it always plays when love wants to look effortless. I stood near a window with my palms flat on the sill, pretending the city glittering below meant nothing, that my pulse was not a drumbeat of fear. They told me not to come. Maybe it's better if you stay home, Mom, my son, Connor, had said over the phone. His voice had wavered, not with warmth but with an exhausted, rehearsed sympathy. It's just small. We don't want a fuss. Small. That single syllable had been the wedge behind everything. When Lena, my new daughter-in-law, arrived an hour earlier in a dress that could have swallowed the skyline, she passed me and barely touched my elbow. She smiled the way a professional smiles before she files a report. Connor hovered in her orbit, as he always had once she was near, obedient, distracted, attentive in all the wrong ways. I didn't belong in their world, not the way they defined belonging. Not the way their friends glanced my way and quickly looked away. I had come because there are things a mother needs to see with her own eyes before she lets them go. I had come because I'd hoped, naively, maybe, a single honest conversation could still exist between us. At the precise moment the band struck a new chord, Lena walked straight up to me and began to speak in a voice crafted to be heard by 100 people. Mrs. Hart, she announced sweetly, loud enough to slice through the music and the laughter, you really should consider downsizing. That apartment of yours is such a waste when Connor and I are trying to start our life together. You know how things are now. Her smile was a saw. I felt the room tilt. Eyes found me one by one, not with compassion but curiosity, the animal curiosity of an audience that smelled drama. Connor didn't move. He watched as though someone had frozen him in place. He had rehearsed his face into an expression he thought looked kind. But kindness, I realized that night, can be a cloak for cowardice. Lena, I said, low, because arguing wouldn't help in a room full of witnesses, and because part of me wanted to keep my voice inside where it wouldn't break. That's my home. I've lived there since your father. You don't need that much space anymore, she cut in, voice brittle. You're older now. We're young. We need a place to start a family. It's only practical. Practical. Another polite blade. She took one step closer as if to pick up a stage prop. Hand me your keys, she demanded suddenly. The words were ridiculous in their cold guile. People turned into the easy posture of spectators. I could almost feel the swell of the phone cameras tucked into pockets. I will not, I began. Her hand moved before I knew what it would do. The slap was not even that loud, but in the echo it seemed to crack the ballroom floor. Color flamed up my cheek and down my neck. The quartet's violins trembled as if the strings were gasping. 160 people watched as my face went hot and then pale. No one went to stop her. Not a guest, not a distant cousin, not even Connor. He stood like a man who had mislaid his courage. Questions swarmed the air. Murmurs. A scattering of whispers, oh my, how rude, is she all right? Many eyes skimmed away faster than shame could be noticed. A few phones rose, someone laughed under her breath. I gathered my glasses from the floor. The metal footings showed the bruise beneath the varnish, and my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped them again. It was not the slap that changed me. It was the silence, the way 100 people made the choice to look away as though a woman being humiliated were simply another accessory at a party. Afterwards, inside a forgettable taxi with sticky vinyl seats and the smell of someone else's fast food, I replayed her words in Connor's statue-still face. I could taste the salt of my own tears and the iron of indignation. I had loved him differently. I had taught him how to fold shirts the way he liked them, how to belt his tie on game days, how to treat the elderly woman next door like an aunt, the small gestures that make up a life. For 40 years I had saved his birthday money in a cookie jar and taken the bus across town so he could have lessons and clothes and a place to study without worrying. I had, the bureaucrats would say, earned the right to a quiet evening in a modest apartment. I had, apparently, also earned the right to be uninvited from the future. When Lena's hand connected with my cheek, she did not feel the weight of all those years. She felt only her plan inching forward. I did not leave the party in that taxi. I sat through the remainder of the celebration in a cheap hotel room across the street, the cheapness chosen deliberately, the lines on the curtains neat because my dignity still demanded order. That night I called 2 people. One I had not spoken to in a decade, Eleanor Shaw, the retired corporate lawyer who had been my husband's partner before the world humbled them both. She was a blunt instrument and a wizard with contracts. The other was a younger man named Ravi, someone I'd supervised years ago when I'd assisted a foundation's board, an accountant by trade and a righteous, nervous sort by nature. "Tell me you're not asking for drama," Eleanor said, voice like gravel and peppermint. But she was listening. "Not drama. Truth," I said. I told them the briefest version: humiliation, a public slap, a son who watched and did nothing, a daughter-in-law who had been planting seeds of discomfort for months. I told them the memory of a dozen magazine-like conversations where Lena had loudly praised luxury and cheaply disguised her interest in my apartment's floor plan. I said what no one wants to admit in the hush of shame: I had suspected, but I had never wanted to believe greed could look so much like entitlement. Eleanor's voice, grudging, replied, "If you want them to understand consequences, you shouldn't whisper. You need evidence. Documents. Records. Things that make lies impossible." For the next 48 hours I became the careful machine I used to be, a woman with a memory that was not frail because she had chosen to hide, a woman who had kept an index of small truths like a hoarder of justice. I would not, let them sell a narrative that I was fragile, confused, or incapable. I would not allow them to make an estate out of my life and call it necessity. After Connor's wedding day, when someone's shoes had scraped confetti off the marble and perfect lipstick had glittered like a promise, I drove to the vault. The vault was a small safe deposit box beneath a different name, Hart and Ellis Trust, an unremarked string of letters belonging to a company my husband and I had quietly built, then quietly dismantled and hidden the earnings of. Thomas had been cautious. He always said, "Appearances keep trouble away." And we had kept our public life sparse, a cheap car, a modest apartment, a work-worn jacket, because modesty drew no leash. I weighed the keys as if they were talismans. I shook out the papers like a wind that had been waiting for a release. Bank statements, deeds, a chain of small companies that gave me both income and autonomy. There were trust instruments, letters of assignment, copies of account transfers, the quiet architecture of a life lived carefully and deliberately so as not to attract vultures. I realized then, sitting in the yellow light of a public parking lot with a folder that smelled faintly of the bank's antiseptic paper, that power had a way of wearing my old coat and moving quietly. I also realized that living small had not been desperation, it had been armor. The armor had been pierced by people who think of mothers as soft things to be deflated into assistance envelopes. There are decisions that change the angle of your life. I placed my hand on the folder and felt something else, an old, steady resolve. If I was to stop being invisible in the way that broke me, quietly, without spectacle, I would not do it with malice. I would do it with clarity. No one will take my home, I told myself, and the fact that I spoke aloud surprised me. Eleanor agreed to help. Ravi moved mountains on the accounting side. We would not storm the wedding. The truth, I decided, would not be blurted like a tantrum. It would be delivered like a verdict. When I finally left the hotel that morning, my cheek was healed, but my plan had hardened in its place. The thing people rarely remember about a slap is the moment after. You either fall into the hole of humiliation, or you begin stepping out of it. I chose to step. And so it began, quietly, like the first page turned in a long book. I learned again to be patient. To gather proof. To place a mirror under the polished shoes of a life that smelled of credit cards, designer covers, and illusions. To hold out a hand to the things that would not run away. They had expected me to fade. Instead, I sharpened. That night, Mrs. Hart's phone buzzed. It was Ravi, her discreet accountant. His voice was calm but edged with urgency. "Madam, I have to show you something. I think they are planning to move funds into offshore accounts. If I'm correct, Lena has already forged your digital signature." Mrs. Hart's grip tightened on the phone. For a moment, the world around her blurred. Her son's betrayal she could still excuse as desperation, but Lena? That woman had slithered her way into the family, wearing false affection like perfume. "Bring everything to Eleanor," she instructed firmly. "And, Ravi, not a word to anyone else. If Daniel or Lena suspect, they'll tighten their grip before we're ready." Her tone was steady, but inside her chest, her heart hammered like a war drum. Lena's plan. Across town, Lena sat in her designer kitchen, glass of red wine in hand. She smiled slyly at the documents spread across her laptop screen. Property titles, bank statements, company shares, each lined up like trophies waiting to be claimed. Daniel paced the floor, restless. "Are you sure this will work? Mother isn't as naive as she looks." Lena rolled her eyes. "She's old, Daniel. Fragile. She clings to sentiment. That's her weakness, and it's our opportunity. By the time she realizes what's happening, everything will be in our name. And if she resists, we'll simply make her look unfit to handle her estate. A few signatures from the right doctors, and she'll be declared incompetent." Daniel hesitated. "She's still my mother." Lena's voice turned sharp. "She's also sitting on millions you'll never see unless we act. Do you want to waste another decade waiting?" Daniel fell silent. His conscience was drowning beneath Lena's venom, but greed was already pulling him under. A friend in the shadows. Meanwhile, Eleanor, Mrs. Hart's lawyer, worked late into the night. She was no ordinary attorney, sharp as a blade, with a reputation for dismantling fraud cases brick by brick. As she flipped through the files Ravi had delivered, she muttered, "They've been careful. But not careful enough." Hidden within the forged transactions was a single mistake, an inconsistency in Lena's handwriting on a signature line. It wasn't obvious, but to Eleanor's trained eyes, it was a thread. And once you pull the thread, the whole fabric unravels. Eleanor dialed Mrs. Hart. "Evelyn, they're after more than money. They're planning to strip you of legal control over your own estate. But don't worry. We'll set a trap. Let them believe they're winning. When the time comes, their own greed will expose them." Mrs. Hart closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer. "Henry," she thought of her late husband, "guide me. Give me strength for this fight." The breaking point. Days passed, and the tension in the Hart household grew thick enough to choke on. Daniel began visiting less, always busy with work, while Lena hovered with false sweetness, constantly reminding Evelyn of her fragile health. One evening, as Evelyn rested in her study, Lena walked in holding a folder. "Mother," she cooed, her voice sugar-sweet but her eyes cold, "the doctors think it's best you sign these papers. Just routine medical directives. Nothing to worry about." Mrs. Hart didn't touch the folder. She only smiled faintly. "Of course, Lena. Leave them here. I'll review them in the morning. The moment Lena left, Mrs. Hart opened the folder. Her sharp eyes scanned the documents. They weren't medical directives, they were power of attorney forms. Signing them would hand complete control of her wealth to Lena and Daniel. Her hand trembled slightly, but not with fear. With fury. Seeds of revenge. Later that night, she called Eleanor. They've shown their hand. It's time we show ours. I want to see their faces when the truth comes crashing down. Eleanor chuckled softly. Then let's prepare the stage. They think you're frail, Evelyn. Let them. We'll turn their arrogance into their downfall. The plan was set. A secret ally. What Lena and Daniel didn't know was that Evelyn had quietly contacted another family member, her estranged niece, Amelia. Unlike Daniel, Amelia had chosen honesty over greed. Years ago, a feud had separated them, but now Evelyn saw her as the only blood relative worthy of her legacy. Amelia arrived quietly one rainy evening. She hugged her aunt tightly, tears streaming down her face. I thought you'd forgotten me. Mrs. Hart whispered, family isn't who takes your wealth, my dear. It's who stands with you when everyone else is waiting for you to fall. Together, they began piecing together Lena and Daniel's schemes, preparing for the storm that was about to break. Suspicion arises. But Lena was sharper than she appeared. One night, she noticed Evelyn whispering with Amelia in the garden. Later, she confronted Daniel. She's hiding something. That old woman isn't as helpless as we think. We need to push faster, before she pulls a trick. Daniel frowned. Push how? Lena's eyes glinted. We convince the board of the family company that she's lost her mind. Once she's declared unfit, we take over officially. By the time she gathers evidence, no one will believe her. And so, their noose tightened. Evelyn's resolve. Alone in her room that night, Evelyn stood before her husband's portrait. They think I'm weak, Henry. But they've forgotten one thing, you didn't build this empire with money alone. You built it with resilience. And resilience runs in my blood. Her reflection in the mirror looked older, yes. But behind her weary eyes was a fire that hadn't burned this fiercely in decades. She knew the final confrontation was near. The morning of the family company's board meeting dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that seemed to foreshadow storms. Inside the Hart estate, Evelyn dressed carefully in a navy suit Henry had once loved. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, her jewelry understated. She wanted no trace of weakness to show. Amelia entered the room with a folder of documents Eleanor had prepared. Are you sure about this, Aunt? Once the meeting begins, there's no turning back. Evelyn smiled faintly. My dear, they think today will be my downfall. But today, they walk into their own grave. The boardroom showdown. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation. The long mahogany table gleamed under the soft light. Daniel sat at the head, Lena by his side, both dressed impeccably, projecting confidence. When Evelyn entered, a few board members exchanged surprised glances. They had been told she was too frail to attend. Yet here she was, walking tall with her cane tapping like a metronome of authority. Daniel cleared his throat. Mother, I didn't expect you today. We were only going to review routine matters. Evelyn's lips curved into a knowing smile. Routine? Or a coup, Daniel? Gasps rippled around the table. Lena leaned forward, voice dripping with false innocence. Evelyn, please, let's not embarrass ourselves. This is about what's best for you. We only want to relieve you of the burdens of management. Her words hung like poison in the air. The accusation. Daniel slid a set of documents across the table. The doctors have noted a decline in your capacity. It's in everyone's best interest that Lena and I assume control of the company assets. Evelyn's hand brushed the papers. Doctors? She echoed softly. Then her gaze snapped to Daniel, sharp as glass. Or forgery. She reached into her bag and pulled out her own folder. You see, I also brought documents today. Proof of forged signatures, falsified bank transfers, and even an attempt to sell off properties under my name. The room froze. Eleanor, seated discreetly at the back, rose with calm authority. Ladies and gentlemen, my client is fully competent. In fact, she has been working with me and her accountant Ravi for months, gathering this evidence. What you see here is undeniable fraud, orchestrated by Daniel Hart and his wife Lena. The panic. Daniel's face went pale. He stammered, "Mother, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't know Lena." But Lena cut him off sharply. "Don't you dare throw this on me, Daniel. You signed everything. You wanted this as much as I did." The board members whispered furiously among themselves. The empire Henry Hart had built was crumbling, not from the outside, but from the betrayal within. Evelyn's monologue. Evelyn stood slowly, leaning on her cane but radiating strength. Her voice, though aged, carried the weight of truth. "I was told once that family is blood. But today, I see clearly, it is loyalty. Daniel, I raised you with love, with every sacrifice a mother could make. And Lena, I welcomed you as a daughter. Yet you both saw me not as a mother, not as family, but as an obstacle between you and your greed." Her eyes burned into them. "You thought I was weak, fragile, blind. But remember this, I built this life with Henry brick by brick, through storms and fire. Do you think I would surrender it so easily?" A heavy silence fell. After the trial, reporters swarmed Evelyn, shoving microphones in her face. One shouted, "Mrs. Hart, how do you feel now that you've defeated your own family?" She paused, her eyes thoughtful. This was never about defeating family. It was about protecting what was right. Greed blinds people, but truth always finds the light. My son made his choices. My duty was to ensure those choices didn't destroy everything Henry and I built. Her words struck like thunder, quoted in newspapers for weeks to come. A new dawn. Back at the estate, Amelia walked beside her aunt through the gardens where roses bloomed fresh with the season. Evelyn's steps were slower now, but her spirit shone brighter than ever. "Amelia," she said softly, "I'm entrusting the future to you. Not because of blood, but because of loyalty, kindness, and strength. The very things Daniel and Lena abandoned." Amelia squeezed her hand, tears in her eyes. "I won't fail you, Aunt. I'll honor everything you and Uncle Henry built." Evelyn smiled. "That's all I ask. Build, but never let greed rule you. Lead, but never forget those who walk beside you." The last encounter. Weeks later, Daniel returned once, broken and hollow. He stood at the gates of the mansion, staring at the home that was no longer his. Evelyn went out to meet him. "Mother," he whispered, voice cracking. I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted to say I'm sorry." Her heart softened, but her resolve remained. "Daniel, forgiveness is in God's hands. But trust, that must be earned, and you've shattered it. I hope someday you find peace, but not at the cost of others again." With that, she turned and walked back inside, leaving him staring at the gates, an exile of his own making. The story of Evelyn Hart was not just about betrayal and wealth. It was about strength, resilience, and the courage to stand against even those closest to you when they choose the path of greed. To my viewers, I ask you this: have you ever been underestimated, treated as useless, or betrayed by those you trusted most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story. And remember this: sometimes, the people who call you worthless will one day come to you begging for help. Life has a way of flipping the script. Stay patient, stay strong, and never let anyone write your ending for you. Sparkles, if you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support keeps this channel alive, and together, we can uncover more tales of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph. Sparkles.